did not hear the ocean at first, not in the way one imagines, roaring, swirling, alive. What Harrison heard in the earliest seconds was smaller than that, closer, stranger, a cluster of sounds that didn't fit together, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of a generator, the scrape of his own chair as he pushed it back. It was early morning on the tugboat, and the world was just beginning to wake. A soft human hour, quiet enough that people still walked gently, not wanting to disturb each other. Harrison was deep in the galley, straightening up the mess left by the night crew, while the sea outside moved with a slow, indifferent rhythm. Nobody knew that within minutes that gentle morning would be broken apart, overturned, swallowed whole. There are moments in life that do not announce themselves, moments that drift in sounding ordinary, even faintly boring, only to reveal, a heartbeat later, that they were the ledge before the fall. Harrison's morning was exactly that kind, soft, harmless, forgettable, until the boat shuddered. It was a single, violent, impossible movement, a lurch that felt like the entire ocean had risen beneath them and slammed the boat's belly with a fist. Harrison froze. A metal pot rolled across the counter and clanged to the floor. He reached out to steady himself, but before his hand even found the table's edge, the second impact came. And then everything tilted. The world didn't lean, it flipped. The floor became a wall, the ceiling rushed sideways. The cupboards ruptured open and spilled their contents into the air. And Harrison, without understanding anything, was suddenly thrown into a chaos so complete he couldn't even tell if he was falling or being thrown. He heard shouting, the terrifying kind, not words, but the strained, panicked tone of men who realize they are already in danger they cannot outrun. The lights flickered. Something heavy crashed. And then the unmistakable sound roared through the ship's steel bones. Water. Violent, rushing water, pouring through a breach somewhere close. Before Harrison could get his bearings, the lights went out completely. The ship rolled again, harder, faster, as though a giant hand had seized it and turned it upside down. Harrison grabbed onto anything, edges, pipes, door frames, his hands slipping on surfaces suddenly slick with seawater. He called out, but the sound died instantly, smothered by metal, water, and the thunder of destruction tearing through the corridors. Then the boat began to sink. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't cinematic. It was like a building collapsing downward through the sea. Harrison felt himself yanked by gravity in directions that no longer made sense. He was plunged underwater, tossed against a wall, dragged by the water's force through the darkness. The cold gripped him sharply, painfully, and he fought wildly to reach the surface of whatever turbulent space he had been thrown into. He didn't know where the surface was. He didn't know which way was up. His lungs burned, and panic thrashed in his chest like something alive. All he knew was that he had to breathe, and he couldn't. Then, somehow, his head broke through into a small pocket of air. He gulped it greedily, coughing, spitting out seawater, clinging to a steel fixture just to keep himself from slipping back under. The boat groaned. Metal screamed as it bent. Something deeper crushed inward with a thunderous crack, and the entire structure plunged even faster. In the churning dark, Harrison felt the unmistakable sensation of falling underwater, but falling, until with a shuddering final impact, the ship struck the seabed. Silence swallowed everything, not the silence of peace, the silence of a place where the world has ended. Harrison clung to the frame above him, trembling, breathing fast, his heart pounding so hard it felt like the sound echoed through the hull. Everything was dark, not dim, not shadowed, dark in the way of caves. No human eyes are meant to see. Total, oppressive darkness, where even holding a hand to your face reveals nothing. He waited for the noise of survivors. None came. He called out again. His voice seemed to die just inches away from him. The air tasted wrong, heavy, stale, metallic. He forced his breath to slow. Panic would burn oxygen, and even without fully understanding the situation, some instinct whispered that oxygen would matter. He didn't realize yet that he was alone in the belly of a ship that had become his tomb. He began to move through the inverted room, hands groping along the ceiling, now to floor, trying to understand the space. Cold water filled everything except the small pocket he stood in. It hugged his waist, then his chest, depending on where he stepped. Each shift sent freezing shock waves through his body. He found bodies. He didn't see them. He felt them. A leg brushing against his arm, limp. A hand drifting in the water, the soft, horrible bump of a shoulder against his hip. He recoiled each time, heart cracking open with terror. He whispered apologies, as though the dead could hear him, as though politeness could protect him from the horror of their stillness. In the dark, the human mind fills silence with dread. Every movement of water felt like a hand reaching for him. Every sound, a groan of metal, a bubble rising, felt like something alive. He tried to lift himself onto the overturned platform above the waterline, but the surface was slick, and the ceiling was low, and the air smelled increasingly foul. He forced himself back into the water, searching for a safer pocket. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep going. The darkness pressed in, thick and claustrophobic. Time disintegrated. Minutes stretched like hours. Hours blurred into something softer and more shapeless. The cold gnawed at his muscles. His breathing became shallow. He tried to pray, whispering quiet fragments of words he barely remembered. If he stopped speaking, he feared the silence would swallow him whole. He found another chamber, another air pocket. He lifted himself into it and rested. The water lapped at his legs, numbing them. His teeth chattered. He hugged himself, trying to preserve heat that kept slipping away. Somewhere above, far beyond the steel walls, was sunlight, wind, and an entire world unaware that he was still alive. Inside the drowned ship, everything felt suspended. Thoughts drifted slowly, heavily. Memories surfaced unbidden. Family, routines, laughter, the ordinary safety of ordinary days. All of it felt impossible now, like things remembered from a life he'd only dreamed. But the body has its own way of insisting on survival, even in terror, even in despair. Harrison found himself monitoring the air, the sharpness of it, the thickness, the way each breath seemed slightly harder than the last. He understood, without needing to voice it, that carbon dioxide was building. He talked to himself, not to stay sane, but to hear something human. The boat creaked often, long, mournful groans that sounded almost like voices. Once the sound was so sharp and sudden that Harrison stumbled, thinking someone had opened a door. But no door could open. No one was coming. He repeated that to himself, then shook his head violently, refusing to believe it. Hope, even when fragile, can be a lifeline. Time passed. The water grew colder. His legs cramped. His fingers wrinkled. His lips grew dry and cracked in the toxic air. He drifted in and out of uneasy awareness. Sometimes he would jerk awake, panicked, unsure how long he had drifted. Sometimes he would sink into a kind of numb stillness, too exhausted even for fear. And all the while, the ship lay silent on the ocean floor, holding him like a single warm breath trapped inside a drowned corpse. After untold hours, hours that no longer had meaning, Harrison heard something new, a faint tapping, not from within the ship, but from above, slight, distant, irregular. He held his breath, listening, uncertain whether it was real or imagined. Then it came again, metal striking metal, soft, intentional. His heart surged painfully in his chest. He shouted. The sound bounced uselessly around his small chamber. He struck the walls with anything he could grab, a piece of debris, his own fist, knuckles splitting open on the steel in his desperation. Above him, movement rippled through the water. He froze, listening. Voices, not clear, not close, but real enough that something unraveled inside him. Something tight and wound with fear broke loose, replaced by a trembling disbelief. He waited, breath held, shaking, the cold forgotten for a moment. Then a sound tore through the water, a diver's tank knocking against the hull. His cry cracked open from his throat, hoarse and raw. He slammed the metal again and again until something struck back, 3 taps, deliberate. He was no longer alone. The moment the diver's hand reached through the opening was surreal, an intrusion of the living into a place that had felt claimed by death. The diver's light passed over the water, and Harrison instinctively reached out, desperate for contact, warmth, human presence. The diver recoiled at first, startled, convinced he had just been grabbed by a corpse. But then Harrison's hand squeezed, warm, alive, and everything changed. They pulled him out slowly, methodically, careful not to shock his body too quickly. The human body, after such cold, such long exposure, such emotional strain, becomes fragile. Harrison felt hands guiding him, stabilizing him, voices murmuring encouragement he could barely process. As they lifted him toward the surface, he felt the world brighten even before he saw the light. His lungs drew deeper breaths. His limbs ached with returning sensation. His mind reeled, caught between disbelief and the lingering terror that somehow it would all vanish. When he finally broke the surface, the sky seemed impossibly wide. The wind on his face felt unreal, almost imaginary. He blinked against the brightness, tears mixing with seawater. He had been alive in the dark for 60 hours alone, cold, trapped at the bottom of the sea. But now, he was rising, returning from a place few humans have ever endured. In the days that followed, people would marvel at his survival, call it miraculous, unbelievable, a 1 in a million chance. They would analyze the physics, the air pocket, the way his body balanced between hypothermia and suffocation. They would examine everything except the part that mattered most, the quiet, stubborn, fragile thread of will that kept him awake in the darkness, hour after hour, whispering to himself that he must hold on. He had lived through something ancient, something primal, the terror of a deep, the suffocating silence of the underworld, the claustrophobic grip of death waiting inches away. And yet, through all of it, he had remained human, afraid, yes, but alive. The ocean had taken his world from him, but in the end, it could not take him. Harrison Okene returned to the light, slowly, painfully, unbelievably. A survivor pulled back from the quiet, crushing breath of the sea's darkest depths.